The room fell silent before Catherine had even finished reading the first sentence. Resting in her hands was a sealed instruction left by Diana, hidden for decades, and protected by a condition no one inside the royal household believed would ever be triggered. But that condition had now been met. The Princess of Wales broke the seal, looked directly at Camilla, and revealed a final command that instantly changed who could touch the family's most treasured jewels. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine felt every pair of eyes settle on her as the meaning of the words spread across the room. Hours earlier, royal archivists had summoned her to Windsor after discovering an ivory envelope attached to Diana's final will. A royal will is a legal record explaining how private possessions and personal wishes should be handled after death. This envelope carried an additional condition. It could be opened only by the wife of Diana's eldest son, if anyone challenged the ownership or ceremonial use of the jewels she had set aside. William stood beside Catherine, motionless but alert. Charles sat across from them, with Camilla at his side, while Princess Anne remained near the end of the table beside two senior legal custodians. These custodians were officials responsible for protecting sensitive records and confirming that private instructions were followed correctly. No aides, secretaries, or household staff had been allowed inside. Everyone understood why. The contents could divide the family in a matter of seconds. Catherine continued reading. Diana's private testament declared that Camilla was permanently barred from wearing, borrowing, controlling, reclassifying, or publicly displaying the jewels reserved for William's wife and descendants. The restriction was direct. It left no room for ceremonial exceptions, temporary loans, or quiet agreements behind palace doors. Camilla's expression hardened. She had expected the document to cover only pieces personally owned by Diana, but the wording reached further. Several historic jewels were also included because the late princess believed they should pass through William's future household and eventually reach his children. The queen consort looked toward Charles, waiting for him to challenge the command. He lowered his eyes and said nothing. William watched his father closely. He could see the conflict without hearing a word. The king was caught between defending his wife and facing the fear Diana had carried to the end. Catherine felt a different burden. She was speaking for a woman she had never met, yet every sentence placed the responsibility directly into her hands. The inventory carried handwritten initials beside 4 pieces: a sapphire necklace, an emerald choker, a diamond bracelet, and a pearl and diamond tiara. Camilla could never claim them. She reached toward the page, but William quietly moved it closer to Catherine. "She was chosen to open it," he said. "She will finish reading it." Catherine reached the final paragraph and stopped. Diana had mentioned an earlier confrontation involving Camilla and one protected jewel. That confrontation, the document stated, would activate the sealed condition. But the command inside Diana's will was only the beginning, because the people gathered around that table were not simply fighting over jewels. They were confronting decades of grief, rivalry, guilt, and unfinished love. To the public, the dispute appeared to concern diamonds, sapphires, and royal tradition. Inside the family, it was something far more dangerous. For William, the jewels carried the memory of a mother he lost too soon. For Catherine, they represented a responsibility she had never requested. For Charles, they reopened a past he could not rewrite. And for Camilla, Diana's final restriction felt like a judgment reaching across the decades to deny her full acceptance forever. William had never viewed Diana's jewelry as decoration. Each necklace, bracelet, and ring carried the memory of her voice, her choices, and the life that ended before he was old enough to understand the pain she had hidden. The collection was not simply valuable. It was one of the few physical links he still had to the woman behind the royal title. Catherine understood that burden every time she wore one of those pieces. She knew the public would compare her with Diana, yet she had never treated the jewels as trophies. To her, they were heirlooms held in trust for Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. A family heirloom is an object preserved so it can pass from one generation to the next, carrying memory as well as value. Catherine also saw Camilla's humiliation. She could hear it in her silence, and feel it in the way the queen consort avoided looking toward the open will. Compassion pulled her in one direction, but duty pulled harder. Ignoring Diana's written command would betray the woman who had protected the jewels, and could fracture William's trust at the very moment he needed certainty. Charles faced a conflict no crown could solve. Defending his wife meant challenging Diana's final wishes. Honoring the document meant watching Camilla absorb a rejection so personal that it reached beyond ceremony and into the deepest wound of their marriage. The king remained quiet, because every sentence available to him sounded like betrayal. Princess Anne finally broke the silence through a documented account she had given to the legal custodians years earlier. She confirmed that Diana had spoken to her privately about the jewels and feared they would eventually be absorbed into the royal collection. That collection is the group of historic pieces controlled for official royal use. Diana believed such a transfer would strip the items of their connection to her sons. Anne then revealed that the sealed instruction had not been written in sudden anger. Diana revised it twice, secured legal witnesses, and deliberately gave final authority to William's future wife, rather than the monarch. She wanted someone close to her eldest son to protect the emotional meaning behind every piece. William later stood alone, with Catherine beside a Windsor window. His voice softened, as he remembered watching his mother fasten the sapphire necklace before an engagement. He admitted that he had believed it was lost forever. Catherine turned to Anne and asked why Diana had feared Camilla might one day claim that exact necklace. The Princess Royal's answer changed everything. It began, she said, with a private request made during a royal jewelry review, an incident the palace had buried immediately. That buried request would become the true point of no return. Because Diana's warning had not been based on imagination, it had been written in anticipation of a moment that eventually came true. Years before Catherine opened the envelope, a single meeting inside the Windsor jewelry vault changed everything. It was meant to be a quiet review of pieces intended for future state occasions. Instead, Camilla made one request that stunned the royal custodians and left Princess Anne openly furious. She asked for Diana's sapphire necklace to be reclassified for use by the reigning queen. That sentence, spoken calmly across a velvet-covered table, fulfilled the exact condition Diana had predicted in her sealed will. Camilla had entered the review believing her position gave her ceremonial access to jewels connected with earlier royal women. The meeting followed a formal inventory, a detailed record used to separate crown property from privately owned pieces and family heirlooms. That distinction mattered because crown jewels could be assigned for official duties, while Diana's personal items were meant to remain tied to her sons and their descendants. Catherine had not been invited. Officials described the gathering as a technical review rather than a family decision, even though the outcome could reshape William's inheritance. Princess Anne immediately sensed the danger. She watched the cases being opened and understood that a simple change in classification could erase the emotional history attached to each piece. Camilla pointed toward the sapphire necklace and asked that it be redesignated for the exclusive use of the reigning queen at state banquets. A royal custodian, an official responsible for protecting and recording valuable pieces, refused to move it until legal ownership had been verified. The queen consort did not withdraw the request. Anne challenged her at once. She reminded Camilla that Diana had worn the necklace during deeply personal moments, and that William believed it had been preserved for his future household. Camilla answered that private sentiment could not be allowed to control royal continuity. The words were measured, but their meaning was brutal. William learned of the exchange through a recorded briefing prepared by the custodians. Anger rose before he reached the final page. He told Catherine in private that his mother's identity was being erased piece by piece. He would not allow Diana's belongings to become symbols of another woman's authority. A senior archivist then uncovered the hidden warning. Attached to Diana's original will was a coded reference stating that if any future consort attempted to reclassify the jewels, the sealed testament must be transferred to the wife of her eldest son. The condition had been activated. Charles had known an additional instruction existed, but he had never been told its contents. He postponed opening it, hoping the dispute would fade. Instead, his delay allowed the conflict to deepen until Catherine's authority became impossible to avoid. Catherine entered the vault after the discovery and lifted the sapphire necklace from its case. She turned toward Camilla and asked whether she had made the request. Camilla did not deny it. "I asked for what belongs to the crown," she said. Catherine had entered the vault seeking clarification, but she left, knowing that silence would be interpreted as surrender. And the next time she faced Camilla, there would be no custodians standing between them. The confrontation did not happen inside a council chamber. It happened behind a closed door, with no lawyers, aides, or senior royals to interrupt. Catherine entered carrying a copy of Diana's instruction. Camilla remained seated and refused to look at it. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Catherine placed the pages on the table and said that the jewels would remain with William's family. Camilla answered with a question that turned duty into something painfully personal. Catherine had requested the meeting before the restriction entered the royal jewelry register, the official record showing who may control, borrow, or wear valuable royal pieces. She wanted Camilla to respond privately before the decision became part of the permanent palace system. That mattered because once the change was recorded, no quiet compromise could easily undo it. Camilla had expected negotiation. She believed Catherine might offer temporary access to one or two pieces for state occasions, where jewelry is often used to signal rank, continuity, and royal authority. Instead, the princess arrived ready to enforce every word exactly as Diana had written it. "Do you truly believe I deserve this?" Camilla asked. Her voice stayed low, but her hand tightened around the chair. She asked whether Catherine understood what the order would say to the world. It would not simply deny her a necklace or bracelet. It would mark the queen consort as someone Diana had judged unworthy, long before she ever wore a crown. Catherine did not look away. She admitted that the restriction felt cruel. But cruelty, she said, did not make a final instruction invalid. Diana had protected the jewels because she feared their meaning would be rewritten after her death. If Catherine ignored that fear now, the pieces would become symbols of power instead of memories preserved for William and his children. Camilla finally broke her silence through a private recorded conversation authorized for the family archive. She revealed that Charles had once offered her access to one of Diana's diamond pieces. The king withdrew that offer only after William objected. To her, the sealed will was not creating a new decision. It was strengthening a rejection the family had already made years earlier. Catherine then disclosed the clause Camilla had not yet heard. Diana's testament also banned replicas. The queen could not commission copies, alter similar designs, or wear pieces intended to imitate the protected collection. The restriction reached beyond ownership. It protected identity itself. Camilla rose so sharply that the chair moved behind her. She opened her handbag, removed a small jewelry key, and placed it beside the will. "Then take everything you believe I was never meant to hold." Catherine picked up the key and noticed the engraved cabinet number. It did not appear anywhere in the official inventory. For the first time, anger gave way to alarm. One of Diana's protected pieces might already have been moved. The argument ended when Catherine closed her hand around the key. But the true battle was shifting elsewhere, to the person with the power to decide whether Diana's command would become royal law or remain a private family wish. King Charles had spent years attempting to separate the monarchy's future from the pain of his past. Diana's sealed will destroyed that separation in a single afternoon. On his desk lay two recommendations. One advised him to treat the restriction as a private request with no institutional force. The other urged him to record it permanently and remove Camilla's access to the named jewels. He read both, set down his pen, and realized that every possible decision would wound someone he loved. Charles still controlled access to much of the royal collection, the group of historic jewels used for official duties and major ceremonies. Diana's document, however, placed the disputed pieces under a separate family arrangement governed by her sons and their descendants. That difference mattered, because the king could not simply claim the jewels as part of the crown without directly challenging her final wishes. Senior advisors warned him that overruling the testament would create an open break with William and Catherine. Enforcing it would carry another cost. The world would see the monarch accepting Diana's distrust of Camilla as valid, permanent, and stronger than the authority of the throne itself. Camilla met Charles alone before he made the final decision. She told him she could survive newspapers, criticism, and public judgment. What she could not survive was rejection inside their own home. The queen consort asked whether he still saw her as his partner or only as the woman Diana had warned against. He tried to comfort her, but every promise stopped short of overturning the will. William entered later with no anger in his voice, which made his words even harder to dismiss. He told his father this was not revenge. Diana had anticipated a battle over her identity, and death had not erased her right to decide what happened to the pieces tied to her life. The prince said that surrendering now would prove her fears had been justified. Princess Anne then produced the original witness record during a documented family briefing. She confirmed that Diana's instructions had been legally reviewed, signed before witnesses, and placed beyond the unilateral control of any future monarch. Charles could enforce the command, but he could not honestly erase it. The hidden cabinet ended the remaining doubt. Camilla's key opened a private compartment containing the missing emerald choker listed in Diana's inventory. Its presence proved that one protected piece had already been removed from the designated family collection. Charles visited the cabinet alone. He lifted the choker, recognized it immediately, and closed his eyes. The memory struck harder than any legal advice. Without calling an aide, the king carried the case himself to William's private rooms and placed it before his son. Then Charles signed the order. Every jewel on Diana's list would pass into Catherine's custodianship, meaning she would hold and protect the pieces on behalf of William's family. The decision was final, but Camilla learned of the signature before her husband could tell her himself. The signature settled the question of control, yet it also delivered a private humiliation directly to Camilla, and her reaction would reveal how deeply the decision had divided the royal marriage. Camilla did not shout when she saw the signed order. She read the first page, turned to the second, and then placed both sheets carefully beside Charles's untouched tea. The listed jewels were no longer accessible through her office. Their cases, keys, records, and ceremonial permissions had all been transferred to Catherine. Charles began to explain that the decision had become unavoidable. Camilla stopped him with one raised hand, removed her wedding brooch, and left the room without it. The order took effect immediately. Royal jewelers were told to update the collection records, change the cabinet access codes, and move every protected piece into a secure room controlled by Catherine and William. Those records were the official files, showing where each jewel was kept, who could request it, and when it could be worn. Once altered, the queen consort could no longer reach the collection through her household. Camilla's team faced the damage within hours. One of Diana's diamond bracelets had already been considered for an upcoming state event, a formal occasion where royal clothing and jewelry carry political meaning. Her staff were forced to remove it from the wardrobe plan and choose a different piece linked to another branch of the family. The change looked small on paper. To Camilla, it felt like a public stripping of legitimacy. Charles followed her into the corridor and asked her not to read the order as a betrayal. She turned toward him with a calmness sharper than anger. He had been given a choice, she said, about who would be left standing alone. The king could speak about law, duty, and Diana's wishes, but he had still chosen which woman would carry the humiliation. Catherine discovered the hidden note while examining the emerald choker. Beneath the case lining, Diana had written that the piece should one day be offered to Princess Charlotte, but only when the young royal understood the woman who had worn it before her. The message transformed the dispute again. This was not simply about keeping Camilla away. It was about protecting a story until the next generation was ready to receive it. William then learned through a recorded wardrobe briefing that Camilla had planned to wear the choker at a diplomatic reception only days later. Had Catherine not opened the will, Diana's necklace would have appeared publicly around the Queen's neck before anyone could stop it. The future king understood how close they had come to losing control of his mother's legacy. Camilla entered her private rooms and opened the empty case prepared for the reception. She ran her hand across the bare velvet, closed the lid, and told her dresser that she would not attend. The decision sent a wave of concern through the household because her absence would expose the division without a single public statement. Catherine watched the damage spreading and made an unexpected choice. She requested one final private conversation, not with Camilla, but with Charles. The jewels had been recovered, and the restriction enforced, but Catherine now understood that victory without mercy could damage the family Diana had tried to protect. Catherine had every legal advantage, William's full support, and Diana's written authority in her hands. Yet she did not feel victorious. The empty chair at the diplomatic reception and the silence between Charles and Camilla made the cost impossible to ignore. Late that evening, Catherine asked the king to meet her alone. She told him the will must be honored completely, but Diana's protection of her legacy should never become an excuse for the family to inflict needless humiliation. Catherine spoke carefully because the restriction itself was final. Camilla could not wear, borrow, copy, or control the protected jewels. But enforcement did not require public punishment, ceremonial embarrassment, or a campaign to isolate her. A private settlement, meaning an agreement handled within the family rather than through public conflict, could preserve Diana's wishes without turning grief into revenge. Charles listened without interrupting. He admitted through that recorded private conversation that he had been waiting for someone to draw that line. Protecting Diana was one thing. Retaliating in her name was another. The king feared William's grief had hardened into anger neither father nor son knew how to release, and every new confrontation made reconciliation feel more distant. Catherine then confessed what she had hidden since opening the envelope. Reading Diana's words had felt as though the late princess had placed a hand on her shoulder. The feeling gave her courage, but it also frightened her. She could fail the woman who trusted her from beyond the grave, or she could protect the past so fiercely that she damaged the family still living around her. Charles lowered his voice and finally revealed why he had kept the sealed document closed. Shame had stopped him. He suspected Diana's words would expose how little trust remained between them near the end of their marriage. The monarch had delayed the truth because he feared seeing his failures written in permanent language. Catherine proposed a path forward. The jewels would remain permanently beyond Camilla's reach, but the palace announcement would describe their transfer as the fulfillment of Diana's maternal inheritance. That phrase meant possessions deliberately preserved by a mother for her children and grandchildren. It would honor the instruction without presenting the queen consort as a public enemy. William resisted when Catherine brought the plan to him. He believed Camilla needed to understand the full consequence of trying to reclassify the sapphire necklace. The prince had spent years watching his mother's memory softened, renamed, and absorbed into palace language. He did not want mercy to become surrender. Catherine took his hand with no advisors present. "Do you want her legacy remembered for love?" she asked, "or for punishment?" William said nothing for a long time. Then he folded the copied restriction and agreed. The palace began preparing the formal announcement, but before a single line could be released, news of the sealed will escaped into public view. Catherine had found a path that honored Diana without weaponizing her memory. But outside the palace gates, the world was already choosing heroes, villains, and a meaning of its own. By sunrise, the secrecy surrounding Diana's will had collapsed. Broadcasters interrupted scheduled programming. Newspaper presses ran through the night. Crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace, carrying flowers beneath photographs of the late princess wearing the sapphire necklace, now at the center of the dispute. Inside Windsor, Catherine watched the coverage in silence, while Camilla refused to turn on a television. What had begun as a private instruction was now being treated as Diana's final public verdict on the royal family. The palace confirmed that a sealed testament had been opened, and that several jewels connected to Diana were being transferred permanently into the custodianship of William and Catherine's family. Custodianship meant legal responsibility for protecting, controlling, and eventually passing the pieces to the next generation. Officials refused to publish every line, but they admitted that the instructions explicitly blocked Camilla from wearing or controlling the named jewels. Catherine heard herself praised across every broadcast. Commentators called her brave, loyal, and fearless. Yet the praise disturbed her. She told William that the public was turning a painful family decision into a victory parade, and Diana's grief was being reduced to a headline. The future king understood her fear, but he also knew the silence surrounding his mother had lasted too long. Camilla sat beside Charles at breakfast without touching her tea. She felt judged by a woman who could no longer hear her explanation or see the life she had built since those bitter years. The queen consort did not ask the king to defend her again. He did not offer another apology. Their silence said enough. The signed order had placed a distance between them that duty alone could not close. A broadcaster then disclosed a devastating detail from a documented wardrobe schedule. Diana's sapphire necklace had been prepared for an upcoming royal reception and was only days away from being worn by Camilla. The revelation changed the tone immediately. The palace had not merely faced a theoretical dispute, it had come dangerously close to violating the sealed command in public. The argument soon moved beyond the jewels. Commentators began discussing Diana's foresight and the way royal memory could be absorbed, renamed, and controlled after death. She had understood that objects could lose their meaning once institutions took ownership of them. By protecting the necklace, she had also protected the story of who wore it and why. The London Chronicle captured the public mood with a full-width image of Diana wearing the sapphire necklace beneath the headline, "Her final word, not for Camilla." Outside Kensington Palace, one woman raised the front page above the crowd. Hundreds began applauding, while others placed flowers beneath the gates. Catherine watched that moment and made her decision. The final palace announcement could not focus only on exclusion. It had to explain who the jewels were being saved for, and why Diana's command was, at its heart, an act of motherhood. The nation had heard who Diana wanted kept away from the jewels. Now Catherine would deliver the final answer about who Diana had always intended to receive them. The final decision was announced not as an act of revenge, but as the completion of Diana's last promise to her sons. Every protected jewel would remain under Catherine's care before passing to William's children, according to Diana's written instructions. Camilla would never wear, borrow, control, copy, or reclassify them. Charles accepted the restriction. William accepted Catherine's call for restraint. And the monarchy finally admitted that Diana's identity could not be separated from the treasures she had deliberately preserved for her family. The palace recorded the sealed testament inside the family archive and updated the jewelry register. The family archive is the protected collection of private royal records kept for future generations, while the register is the official list showing who may hold, wear, or control each piece. Those changes meant no future monarch, consort, courtier, or household office could quietly overturn Diana's restrictions. Catherine became the recognized custodian of the sapphire necklace, emerald choker, diamond bracelet, pearl and diamond tiara, and every additional jewel named in the will. She did not receive them as personal rewards. She accepted them as a duty, knowing they would one day pass to William's children with their history intact. William found her after the announcement and spoke without the anger that had driven him through the earlier confrontations. He told Catherine she had protected more than jewelry. By opening the envelope and refusing to soften its meaning, she had defended his mother's right to remain part of her children's story. The prince had spent years fearing that Diana would be remembered only through scandal and loss. Now he knew her final wishes had survived. Charles met Camilla privately and apologized for allowing her to learn of the signed order from others. The king admitted that his silence had deepened her humiliation. She accepted that the jewels were permanently beyond her reach and promised never again to challenge Diana's designated inheritance. The queen remained wounded, but the battle itself was over. Catherine then read the final page again. Diana had not attacked Camilla by name. Instead, she wrote that her jewels must remain with those who would remember her as a mother, not merely as a former royal wife. That final truth changed the meaning of everything. The restriction had never truly been about status. Diana feared her sons would watch their mother's personal history become ceremonial property, controlled by people who had not shared their loss. She had protected the jewels because she was protecting the bond between herself and her children. Catherine opened the sapphire necklace case while Charlotte stood beside her. She did not allow the young princess to wear it yet. "One day," she said, "you will understand why your grandmother wanted you to know where this came from." Camilla remained queen, but those jewels would never belong to her story. Charles remained king, but he could no longer rewrite Diana's final choice. William received the protection his mother intended, while Catherine proved worthy of the responsibility placed in her hands. The seal was broken, the jewels were secured, and the argument was finished. Diana's final command did not remove Camilla from the monarchy, but it permanently protected the one part of Diana's legacy that no crown, marriage, or passage of time would ever be allowed to take from her children. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.